I love an interview and I love a life instance that starts with serendipity and synchronicity. And in the first 30 seconds of talking to you, we've had two really beautiful serendipities and synchronicities. And as I've gotten to know your work, as I've read your bio, as I've followed you on Instagram, I'm so inspired with the clarity of mission, the passion of your work, and how you've been able to change not only what people are doing individually, but also really create change on a global scale. And so thank you for taking time to be with me and have this conversation today. People know you as the food babe, but today I thought it would be interesting to dive into a little bit more of your personal journey of how you became the food babe, and also how what we put in our mouths is very much impacting our consciousness. And I think that oftentimes people separate that. They think that meditation is just something you do for your mind, or food is something that you're just doing for your body. And I don't think people really understand just how much what we're consuming impacts our brains, our neurons, our neurochemistry, and therefore our consciousness. So I'd love to start there. Like, can you give us your interpretation of the connection between food and consciousness?
Yeah. You know, I grew up with two immigrant Indian parents that came to the United States, and they really wanted to adopt the American lifestyle. So my dad, who had an arranged marriage with my mother, brought her to the United States on their honeymoon and said, "Hey, if we're going to live in America, we're going to eat like Americans, and here's a McDonald's hamburger." And my mother had never had any meat to that point, right? In India, the cow is sacred, so you definitely didn't have beef.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Okay." And being naive and young, she just kind of took my dad's hand and was like, "Okay, this is how we're going to eat." And she quickly realized that this diet wasn't for her. So she started to, use her mother's recipes here in the United States and started to make, from scratch Indian food for herself. But me and my brother, because we had this influence from my dad, and he was kind of a strong patriarchal voice in our household, he was really of the mindset, as long as we eat, we're fed and we're healthy, because they had grown up with so much poverty around India that getting a McDonald's hamburger for $1, or the free meal that you would get on Mother's Day or Father's Day when you color the pictures of flowers at McDonald's and get the free breakfast, that was like the golden ticket in terms of like, wow, you can feed your kids for really cheap. And it was like fast food was carte blanche in our house, when as much as fast food as we ever wanted. And so me and my brother, especially me, had several health issues, and not one single doctor asked me, or asked my parents, what are they eating, right? Like, what are your children eating? And so they put me on so many different prescription drugs. And in my
How
early
old were you at
20s,
this point?
I mean, this was most of my life as a child. I mean, I just remember completely not feeling comfortable in my own skin, to the point where I would wake up completely groggy, out of it, not full of energy, not excited to go to school. And I just thought this was just the way I was supposed to be, right? This is just who I am. This is how I was born. And it wasn't until my early 20s where I hit rock bottom, where I had just gotten a, really good job out of college. And because I had this, again, these Indian parents that are very focused on education and getting a job and academics, I did okay in school because I had that pressure. However, looking back now, knowing how my brain actually functions on real food, and I think to myself, like, can I even imagine what I could have been in high school and in my middle school years, or even in college, or what I would have been able to develop earlier in my life had I had my mind on straight. And so when I hit rock bottom in my early 20s, I was overweight. I was working for this job that was like so crazy. It was like, 70 to 80 to 90 hours a week, some weeks, where they would, work you to death. You're right out of college. So you don't necessarily need that much sleep, and you're young, and, they're putting you in this really fast paced environment that's very exciting, and everyone's on an expense account, and you're traveling for work, and they're bringing in breakfast, lunch, and dinner, again, outsourcing my diet to like this environment. And I just found myself like not taking care of myself, trying to excel at my career, and then ending up in the hospital with appendicitis and almost dying, to the point where it just was this huge wake up call of like, wait a minute, I'm 22 years old. This isn't how I want to conduct my life. When I got out and was able to recover from the actual, abdominal incisions of them taking out an organ of my body, and I was able to like, again, use my like logic and kind of think through what the doctors had told me. And the doctors are like, listen, you don't need your appendix. It's something that we've grown to evolve out of, and, all these things. And I'm just like, something just doesn't make sense to me that all of these doctors say you don't need your appendix, but although the human body has it. And it's like, why would it be there? Right. And so I started to research it myself, and I found out that your appendix actually is there for a reason, that all the new research and new science shows that it populates your gut with good bacteria and helps you stave off certain kind of cancers and other abdominal digestive issues and other things. So it's like, wait a minute, why are we removing this organ? Is there some other thing that I could have done, some intervention, right? At that moment when I started to connect the dice, I started to use my skills that I learned in high school, where I was a top tier debater. I was number one in state 3 years in a row. It was just something that I loved. And so the best thing that I learned from that period of my life was how to research. And so I applied that to my own health and went to the library and started to check out giant books on nutrition. And one of the first books that I came across had this concept in it that the majority of foods on the grocery store shelf are dead. They're completely dead. And I said, whoa, that's exactly how I feel. Dead. Zombie-like. And then, slowly but surely started to research everything that I had been eating, and started to realize that the majority of foods that I'd been eating for most of my life were things I could not pronounce. I didn't recognize. They weren't real food. They were long chemical names that I didn't know what was the purpose of them. And so I wanted to find out. So I educated myself. I became so enthralled with it. It was like this insatiable curiosity that I had that I just could not quench. I had to know everything. And then around the same time is when my body started to change. I went off all 9 prescription drugs, realized a level of health that I never thought was possible, like in terms of never dieting again, always feeling really great about myself, feeling full of energy, having a face full of eczema and inflammation to a face that finally looked clear. And I started to feel more confident about my looks. It was a point in time where everyone around me was like, okay, you've changed so much. What are you doing? We want a piece of what you're doing. Like, what's this green drink you're drinking? What is this? Why do you keep asking the server about MSG in the soup? Why are you so concerned about artificial food dyes now? You used to eat all of this candy, Vani. I was the candy queen. I knew every single kind of candy. I would eat a whole box of, if anybody remembers Runts, I don't know if they still have them, but Runts and Gobstoppers. And, to this day, like my mom's like, I feel so bad that I didn't know, right? That this was so bad. I feel so bad about
because it seems inconceivable that they would just have that on the shelf, that you're just going to take your kid to the grocery store. You think you're doing something good by making a home cooked meal. Like, why would you think that there would be this poison and these chemicals in our food? Like, unless you do your research, like you're saying, like, we only know what we know, and we've been actively brainwashed to believe that this stuff is even healthy. And so I just feel for your mama that, like, she must have held, like, when you had this revelation and then she was cooking her food for herself, like that must have been heartbreaking for her.
Yeah. She just thought she was feeding her children. And, I guess, there was some intuition around like candy can't be all that good for you kind of situation, right? But it was never like, there was no, like, my mom never said to me, like, you can't eat that. there was literally no boundaries when it came to food. All the Swiss cake rolls and the Little Debbies and all the things,
Oh, the
right?
Little Debbie, the oatmeal
Right?
cream pies. Every day
Yeah.
I used to have
All of
them.
it.
I think about the toaster pastry strudels that you would
Yeah.
microwave, and then the microwave icing in the plastic bag. You would, I mean, it's just like how on earth
So
any of
I
us are still
remade that.
alive is
It's
like a
funny.
miracle.
I remade that exact recipe in my latest cookbook, Food Babe Family, because of the
Yes.
nostalgia of that. Like, I want families to actually be able to make something fun, but not be terrible for you.
And like
So
microwaving sugar in plastic and then eating it. It's like, what did you think was going to happen, everybody?
yeah,
Like, that's when I
yeah.
go in the store. I'm just like, this is all sugar wrapped in plastic. This is chemicals wrapped in plastic and sugar wrapped in plastic. And we're all just killing ourselves.
Yeah, we are. We are.
Okay, so you put your debate skills into researching, and you had this huge health transformation. People are starting to ask you, what are you doing? And and then you started your blog, or like what was next?
Yeah, so I was never on social media. So like when I
Hmm.
shared this information, it was like word of mouth. It was like the person sitting next to me in my cubicle, or my best friend who I went out with on the weekends. And around this time is when I would say Gwyneth Paltrow came out with Goop, and she had this column on there all to do with travel, and I'm really into travel. So I started reading it because I was like, oh, this is great. She's really avant-garde when it comes to travel, and like, this is so cool. Oh, maybe I can create a blog like this, right? And so I started a blog, and I wanted to call it eathealthyliveforever.com. And again, I'm still working in this rat race, fast-paced consulting environment. I did not take off from that. The only thing that I made, the biggest change that I made, was I said, my job is not going to dictate what I eat. I'm going to be in control of
Hmm.
that. So I started bringing in my lunch, started taking in my breakfast, started, carving out 45 minutes to run to the gym for my break and coming back, doing those kind of things to take care of myself. And and then I eventually started to travel on the road. And so now I'm in the airports. Now I'm in different strange cities that don't have access to like healthy stuff. And so I'm teaching myself on how to bring foods through the airport, how to pack them without getting stopped at security, what travels well, what recipes don't. I'm teaching myself all that stuff, because it's out of necessity. And then
Yeah.
I'm figuring out how to order at restaurants so that I minimize my chemical exposure, all of the things. Because if I'm traveling 5 days a week, every week for 2 years, that's a lot of time to be away. So I realized that I had to give up something in order to find time to do this blog. And I just gave up television. It was Lent, and I'm not Catholic, but I said, for Lent, I'm going to give up television. And it was the best decision of my entire life, was giving up television on so many different levels, from the fact that television just programs you to think a certain thing, but and just all the commercials and all the
And it's mostly
influence that it
advertising the
provides.
food that's making us sick.
Right. I mean, just all the things, right? Just so many ahas with that. But then it gave me the time to actually work on, hey, I can share this recipe, or I can share this insight that I learned about this company or whatever. And I can share this information. And it became such a passion that while I was at work, I would be thinking about the next blog post I wanted to write. And I would even sometimes like sit there and daydream, and I would jot down kind of ideas, on my notepad at work or whatever, like in meetings or whatever. And I would start to just daydream about when I'd get home so that I could write and research. And it was the first time many of the things that I investigated were even talked about on the internet, because a lot of these companies didn't even post their ingredients online. It was research that I had to figure out. I had to call the companies. I had to write to the companies. I had to demand that they tell me the ingredients. And a lot of times they wouldn't give it to me. So I'd have to go down to different chains. Like for Chipotle, I had to convince a manager in the back of the store to show me the different packages and boxes that the food came in, that I took pictures of, and were able to reveal what was actually in Chipotle, and call them out for the fact that they were using the phrase food with integrity, but serving GMOs. Eventually they took out the GMOs and took out a lot of the chemicals that I wrote about, which was incredible. So, and I started to build this community that I ended up calling the Food Babe Army, because they were so into what they were eating, but also they cared enough to like spread the word. They wanted to share the blog post. They wanted to sign a petition. They wanted to call the company and demand better. And they were activists, and it was so cool. And so anytime I would write about something, it would just take off. It was just this amazing thing. And so when a blog post that I wrote about Chick-fil-A, they had it used to have 100 ingredients in it. And when that blog post went viral, they contacted me and wanted to meet with me. And I remember when I got the email, and I was so nervous, and I was like, wow, they want to invite me to their headquarters and they really want to make some changes. Like, this is big time. And I'm going to have to take off work to go there. Right. And I realized me taking off work to go there was so silly. Like, I should be doing this full time. I should be helping companies full time get better. And so after I got back from that visit, I realized that I had to quit my corporate job. And it was so scary because I wasn't making any money doing Food Babe. It was completely just free time because it was a passion of mine. And it opened up a Pandora's box. And that's when I launched one of the biggest campaigns to date, which was on Kraft macaroni and cheese, when they were back then, they were serving Americans one version of mac and cheese that had artificial food dyes in it, and serving another version to citizens overseas that didn't have artificial food dyes in it, because in Europe, it requires a warning label if you use an artificial food dye that says may cause adverse effects on activity and attention in children. And so I was able to get over 380,000 signatures on a petition and deliver those petitions to Kraft headquarters and demand that they remove these artificial food dyes. They didn't do it right away. They definitely stuck their heels in the ground. But because of the momentum of the campaign and because we were able to move so much market share, they had to do it by the end of the year. So, and they did.
Wow. Okay. So first of all, like, thank you for using your brilliance, your intelligence, your debate skills, your personal tragedy to not only transform the individual lives of people, but then mobilize those people, like you said, to be activists, to really change the system for all of us. So a couple of follow-up questions on this, and then I want to dive a little bit deeper into consciousness, but like, why should we care about food dyes? Like, what is the issue? Like, is it just attention, or what, like, why? Because I know this is a big one for you.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think I'm quite educated on other things, but I don't know that much about food dyes. So
Yeah. So food dyes are something that is in several different children's products. It's in just about every cereal that's, targeted towards children. That's a conventional cereal. It's there to make the child eat more than they should as well. Like, they've done independent studies where they've looked at adding more colors to food. And as soon as they add more colors to food, it makes the child eat more of that product.
Well, because we're genetically, we're like meant to be eating the rainbow, but the rainbow is produced by nature, not by food dyes.
Right, exactly. So you got to think about how sinister that is when it's a garbage sugar for you cereal, for example, like Fruit Loops, right? And a lot of these companies have already reformulated their products, safer versions overseas, like Kellogg's and General Mills. And right now I have an ongoing petition against Kellogg's to remove artificial food dyes. And I'm working with a coalition of other activists to get this done. And right now we have over 94,000 signatures on it. If you want to sign it, it would be amazing, because we really want Kellogg's to change. But it's foodbabe.com/babyshark. But the worst part about it is Kellogg's in 2015 decided they wanted to remove artificial food dyes, gave themselves a date of 2018, and they didn't do it. And what they did instead was create more cereals targeted towards infants and toddlers with artificial food dyes, like Baby Shark. And that, I felt, was just a very unethical, hypocritical thing to do, considering the statement they had made in 2015. So they're a company that's, really, unfortunately, been just completely, I think the best word is just unethical, because they understand the impacts they're making on children's health. Food dyes have been implicated in, causing attention deficit disorder, autism, can affect asthma, eczema, skin issues, can affect their immune system. So if you look, there's like 92 different papers that have been published on the effects of artificial food dyes and the detrimental effects. And so this is something that other countries have already taken out of their foods, and the companies
Yeah.
have willingly done it because of these warning labels. And we're the ones with the American companies that know this has been happening and they refuse to do it. And it's because the FDA is asleep at the wheel, and they are unfortunately being, lobbied by these big companies. And there's a lot of control when it comes to what the FDA decisions are because of the lobbying money.
And it feels like the same pattern we see with, the oil companies lobbying our politicians, and then the pharmaceutical companies lobbying the politicians. And so this really is this systemic issue. But I really love that it does feel like a bit David and Goliath, because like here's this one person who's mobilizing these people that are getting these behemoth organizations to shift their behavior. And so like that is inspiring to me, because if we can get one big food company to do it, could we also do it with petroleum? Could we also do it with a pharmaceutical company? And I think once people are educated and they realize like, oh, the thing that I thought was supposed to make me healthy is actually making me sick. Oh, this medicine that I'm taking, I actually have to take because of the food that I'm eating. And now here's these like 3 companies getting richer on each other's backs. Wait a minute, I can take charge of this for myself. So it's really inspiring. So while we're talking about food dyes, can you tell us a little bit about glyphosate? Like, what is it? What does it do to us? What does it do to our food? Where is it? Because I know this is a big one for me, and I would just love for people to hear from you, like, why should we be avoiding it?
Yeah. So glyphosate is the main chemical that's in Roundup. And Roundup is a product that was created by Monsanto. Bayer now owns Monsanto, and it's now Bayer. And Roundup is being sprayed on the majority, I would say 80% of crops here in the United States. And
all crops, not just wheat.
Correct. So
Okay.
a lot of people think that it's just the genetically engineered crops, which yes, the genetically engineered seeds are created to withstand heavy doses of this Roundup, the seeds that were also proprietarily owned by Monsanto, right? The corn, the soy, the canola. I'm trying to think of, sugar beets. All of that would be genetically engineered. Cottonseed. A lot of people don't realize that cottonseed oil, which is a industrial byproduct of the cotton industry, has made its way into our food. It's one of the most toxic oils. It's in a lot of different food, including cereals that are given to children. It's in a lot of oils that you would get French fries fried in. It's a really very detrimental oil because not only does it have high levels of glyphosate in it, but it's also extracted with hexane and all these other chemical solvents that the FDA doesn't test for that remain in the oil. And that's one of the reasons why seed oils, you'll hear a lot about seed oils and why they're so detrimental to your health. It's because of that. They actually turn on cancer cells, as well as the glyphosate also being implicated to cause cancer. There are several court cases across the United States right now that plaintiffs are being awarded billions of dollars because of the fact that glyphosate causes cancer in people that have been handling Roundup, like whether they're a gardener or there's someone working in the fields. And so yes, when you come into contact,
are they paying out? Are they actually paying the money that people are winning?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that bodes well, because I have a friend who won a case against Chevron, and he was the first civil rights attorney to win a case against a petroleum company. He won $11 billion for the Ecuadorian people because of the cancer that was being caused from the drilling in the rainforest in Ecuador. And they, instead of paying those indigenous people in Ecuador, they put him in jail, disbarred him, took his passport, and vacuumed his bank accounts.
Wow.
And so, because for me, it feels like if they've if the petroleum company set a precedent of paying out for the harm that they have caused, they will go bankrupt, right? Because we could all charge against climate change.
Right.
But I am glad to see that they are paying out for these individual cases, because then that, if it gets rampant enough, it becomes so expensive for them that it's more cost effective for them to actually change course, it feels.
Yeah, absolutely. So now at the minute level, in terms of like what's happening to the human body when we eat this food, it's causing a lot
Mm-hmm.
of tiny holes in our guts. And that's causing all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of like leaky gut issues, other things that are happening in terms of how that can cause autoimmune disorders and other things that would happen as a result of being exposed to this kind of food and these chemicals. So this is something we just don't want to eat. And so the best way to avoid glyphosate is to buy organic food, buy USDA certified organic food. It's one of the reasons why when I started my company Vani, that's the highest tenet of our brand, that we will always choose organic over any other supply because of the fact that we want to avoid glyphosate. We test for glyphosate in our products as well. So it's
Mm-hmm.
something that I find is one of the most important standards to protect human health in this day and age in terms of how things are grown. But
Mm.
not only is it found in genetically engineered ingredients, but it's also found, in just in conventional crops. Like, for example, before wheat is harvested, even though wheat isn't genetically engineered per se, before it's harvested, they desiccate the land with Roundup. And so it's getting into our food. And when you look at tests of Cheerios, big major brands, Doritos, Goldfish, they're finding high levels of glyphosate in these companies because the wheat is actually saturated with glyphosate.
My friend Zach Bush, I don't know if you know Zach Bush, but
Mm-hmm.
he was saying that the glyphosate is actually like changing our DNA and it's changing our gender expression. And I was like, whoa, this feels like a fascinating hot button topic because,
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I am
frogs.
all
Yeah,
for.
there's studies on frog. I mean, I'm sure there's studies on all kinds of animals, but particularly frogs, when they're exposed to this chemical, it changes their sex.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. This is mind boggling. And so I know I know you have an amazing cookbook. Your new cookbook is The Food Babe Family, which I want to ask you some personal questions about that because I have a 5-year-old son that, like I was saying earlier, like cannot get him to eat a vegetable to save my life. And I thought that this
Well,
was going to be the hill I was going to
I
die
want to,
on.
I want to dive deep into this. Like, what do you mean he won't eat a
Yes.
vegetable? Like, he just won't eat one, or?
Well, so he's 5 now, and when he was like pre-verbal, I could like I would just put like vegetables and chicken. I would like roast chicken and vegetables, and he would eat it like crazy. His first food was an avocado, and I just thought I was so proud of myself. I was like, look at me, like look at me
Yeah.
being such a good mom, feeding my son so many vegetables. And then I think it's like once he understood, and like the sweetest thing he ever had till he was 3 was like a blueberry. But then when he started to have more agency in the world and was like tasting things in other places, and I don't know if I was too restrictive, and he was just like, oh, I've tasted the promised land and I'm never going back. But like every meal I still serve him vegetables, and it becomes a negotiation. And I find that I'm like negotiating dessert for him to eat vegetables. And now I'm like deifying dessert, but also I'm like anything to get a carrot in his mouth. And so I'm very open to your advice here. And I feel like I'm not alone.
Well,
I feel like I hear a lot of parents struggling with this.
my son has been on a similar path. He's much different than my
Mm-hmm.
daughter. My daughter has not met a vegetable she doesn't like, right? She's all about vegetables. But my son, I don't know if he's just a little bit wiser to it or what's going on, but he does push back a little bit when it comes to vegetables. And we have
Mm-hmm.
so many vegetables every single day, every single meal. I try to change it up. We do a different vegetable every single day. It's like my life, right? But
Yeah.
it is their job to push back. Like, literally, their
Yeah.
job as children to push the boundaries. And it's up to us parents to have those boundaries. And so it's okay, I think, and this is based on my pediatrician's advice too, but it's okay to say, hey, listen, we fill our bodies with these good foods, and then these fun for you foods later on, we can't have them, but we have to fill our bodies with good foods. Or saying things like, we fill our body with a rainbow. We have to have something of each, color. And he loves
Mm-hmm.
that, right? And making it a fun game, that kind of thing, has really helped him enjoy and taste other things that he may not want to taste or looks different or whatever, right? And be less picky. But I
Yeah.
will tell you this: when kids are inundated with products that have a certain chemical in them called natural flavor, they are going to have a hard time enjoying real food, because the reason natural flavor is in these products is to hijack their little brains and make them believe that the only way they're going to get their nutrition and the way that they're going to like food is by eating that said product. Because what it does is it creates the 1 millionth best part of a taste in a chemical. I mean, there are food scientists that used to work in tobacco that were the leading scientists who made tobacco addictive, that now have come over to food and are using the same technology and the same research to create addiction in food products so that we can't stop at eating just one. And when it comes to remembering a flavor, remembering a taste, making your body actually react, like your mouth start watering when you think of a certain food, the fact that you know the difference between a McDonald's hamburger and a Burger King hamburger and a Wendy's hamburger, it's because they're engineering that flavor for you to really like take a hold of your memory. And so they're doing the same thing with any kind of processed food product, and they're using that same technology. And so when kids are eating an abundance of processed foods, and I would say 99% of processed foods have natural flavor in them, it is
And it's just called natural flavor. Like that's what the ingredient is natural flavor.
It sounds so, it sounds so innocuous, right? And it's just it's like, oh, natural flavor. This is great. It's natural, but it's not. It can mean up to 1,000 different chemicals. And it's the one thing that food manufacturers add to their food so that it gives it that irresistible quality. When you think of sugar, okay, if somebody were to give you a cup of sugar, just plain old cane sugar, how exciting would that be to eat? Are we really addicted to sugar, or are we addicted to the flavor that they add to the sugar?
Oh, Vani, this feels revolutionary because that's all we hear. Sugar, sugar, sugar. But yeah, you're right. Like I could maybe do like a half a teaspoon and then I'd be like, gross. But you're right. I wouldn't eat a whole cup of sugar.
No.
So it's like the flavor that we're adding to it. That is fascinating.
Yes. And so this is what's happening to our kids. And so for my kids, what I have done is I have tried to eliminate as many processed foods as possible. And at every snack time, every meal time, we're eating as many real foods as possible. And the things that we eat that are more fun for you things, maybe like a homemade pizza or whatever, is always served last in terms of the course. And there's a lot of data that suggests that when you eat vegetables first, it's actually really great for your glycose levels, for all kinds of reasons. Glucose levels. It's good for your digestive system. It's good for populating your gut with good fiber, like to signal to the body when to feel full. All of those things, so you don't overeat on other types of foods. So, like at my house, my kids know we serve it in courses. So we're eating vegetables first every single time, and our fruits always last. Actually, the sweet things always last.
Yeah, I love that. And because that's a little bit different than like the school of Instagram, because like the parenting school of Instagram, where they're like, there's a new philosophy where it's like, just put everything on the plate all at once. It's like, here's your chicken, here's your M&Ms, here's your potatoes. And no, of course they're going to go directly for the M&Ms.
I don't agree with that. Yeah, I just don't agree with that philosophy. And I like to eat my vegetables first too. It's like I know I'm getting my abundance of nutrition in that way too. And then when I get to the rest of my meal, it's like, okay. And then we end with like, the roasted potatoes. I don't like overdo it with like the carbohydrates, right? Like it's a healthy thing for me. It's a healthy thing for my husband. It's a healthy thing for my kids. And they have also, because of this, do great at restaurants when there's long meals, because they know they're sitting there for different courses, and they know other things are
because
coming.
now they've practiced doing courses.
Yeah.
So the show is called Why Isn't Everyone Doing This? And I want to know from your journey, from your research, like, has there been a thing that you found, a solution, or even something that you want people to avoid where you're like, oh my gosh, why isn't everyone doing this?
Yeah. I think it has to do with reading the ingredients, on packaging, and knowing the ingredients of what you're eating. Like if you don't know the ingredients, you have to put the package back down. Like you have to find out what those ingredients are. And if you don't recognize them or can't pronounce them or don't understand why they're there, like, why are you putting that garbage in your body? Like there's no sense in putting, toxic chemicals in your body. Like, what's the purpose of it being there? Like, why do you want to be part of that experiment when you could have the best health imaginable by just eating real food?
Yeah, just eating food from the earth and increasing your state of consciousness. Because I think, it doesn't matter how much you meditate, if you're eating chemicals all day, every day, and surrounded by chemicals, it's going to be very hard to feel comfortable in your body, to feel connected to source. And like you said in your story in the beginning, like when you were eating all of this, like you just felt uncomfortable in your body. And so I really want people to take that connection of what we are eating is 100% impacting not only our physical health, but also our spiritual, mental, and psychological health.
And can I just add one thing to that? I think it's so important for people to listen to is that I don't think that you can find your calling in life, the reason why you're here on earth, until your brain is actually functioning at its optimal level. I don't think you're able to achieve that until it's functioning at an optimal level, because I know I wouldn't have been able to do any of the work that I've been able to do in the world had I not gotten my health right first.
Oh, amen. And like once your brain is clear, then you can connect to source. You can hear your intuition. You can hear how nature wants to use you to make change in the world. So I know we didn't even talk about it. I want to just shout out to Lauren Zander of Handel Group for connecting us. It's someone we've both coached with and worked with, and I'm so grateful for. So I know, so people can find you at foodbabe.com. Where else can people find you? Because I know people are going to dive into your work. I know your Instagram is amazing. Thank you for making this so simple and so actionable. Like swap this for this. So where can people find you?
You can just come over to Food Babe, and you can also check out truevani.com for all of the amazing products that I've created that, we have a serious ingredient standard. We use the least amount of unnecessary chemicals as possible in our products. And we're actually the #1 plant-based protein powder on the market right now because of that. And it's been this amazing journey to see what we've created. We just created a bar a few years ago that was ingredients that you would find in your own kitchen, like, something that you would just go and you would make and put together. And we were able to mass produce this bar. And now we're going to have 12 flavors this year. And it's just taking off. And it's just this cool thing where we're disrupting the food industry in a way that I wanted to see change happen, because for many years I was coming out from the outside in. And now I'm going in from the inside out, which is so exciting because I'm able to inspire other companies to increase their standards in terms of how they source ingredients. So.
Yeah, bravo. And then like modeling what is possible. I call this the Reese Witherspoon effect, where it's like rather than going in and trying to change the Hollywood system, she's like, oh, I'm just going to make my own production company and it's going to be wildly more successful than everything you're doing. So prayers up that Truvani just ends up being the gold standard of what is possible with our food creation in the world. And thank you, not only for today in this conversation, but truly the work that you're doing in the world and helping to create a safer food environment for each of us and for our children. So sweet friends, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Why Isn't Everyone Doing This? I hope that you've learned as much as I have. I hope you feel inspired to start reading those ingredients, to start being mindful and conscientious about what you're putting in your body, not only for the health of your body, but also for the shift in your consciousness. So if you've learned something, if you feel like joining this beautiful Food Babe army, if you feel like taking action to change our food system, you can go to foodbabe.com. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you can screenshot it and tag us. I'm at Ziva Meditation and at the Food Babe. And we will see you next week on Why Isn't Everyone Doing This? Mwah.